Well, welcome to DTLT Today. We have another awesome episode ahead, and we're joined here today by Marie McAllister. Hi, Marie. Welcome.
Good to see you, Jim.
It's good to have you. You know, feels like we just did this yesterday.
Sort of.
So, Marie was actually a part of the UMW Domains, what is called the Domain of One's Own. She was a faculty participant in the faculty initiative. We had 30 faculty from all over the campus, some administrative faculty, some full faculty, full teaching faculty, I think you'd say. And we had them actually get their own web host and domain and actually build out their own spaces. And we kind of took them through a 6-week process of learning what kind of anything from a subdomain is to installing their own application using Installatron to kind of basically understanding what it means to build and maintain their own space online. And it just so happens that the other day, Marie McAllister and I were talking about kind of what we called souping up your domain or reclaim, rebuild your domain, whatever you want to call it. And we actually talked in more detail, and so it kind of led to this discussion. But before we go there, and we will go there, I think it's important to note that you and I have been working with instructional technologies and doing stuff with integrating technology into your classroom for near on a decade. Right?
That's a fact.
At least
Yep.
8 years. Yep. And it's been amazing to kind of watch the stuff you've done over time. And one of the projects I'll point to immediately, there have been many, but one of the ones that for me I always find and I talk about a lot when I go out and talk about the work faculty doing is your 18th century audio.
UMW Blogs has been a really nice resource for that. That was fun.
It's been awesome. So can you say a little bit, I'm going to bring it up on the screen now, can you talk a little bit about what this project is and how you've used it in your class?
Yeah, basically it's just an archive of recorded poems from 1660 to 1800, which is the period I teach my specialized classes in. And students can record their own poems, which in fact they all have to do. And students can listen to poetry read by each other, by people from around the world, by professional recorders. And so there's a large body of poetry on there. Yeah. Poetry tends to be kind of hard to read when it's that old. Sure. And so listening to it helps a lot of students do better with it. So if I assign Alexander Pope's essay on women, like I did on Monday, I can say, if you want to listen to a recording of it, it's there. And the students have gotten pretty into this. They are building some cool things. This semester, rumor is some of them are going to be videoing recordings instead of just audio taping recordings. Wow. Should be some fun stuff happening there, yep.
So do you think, just in your own experience, that having them read out the poem like that or asking them to read and record it helps them understand it?
Definitely it does.
It does.
But the cooler thing is that nowadays I'm saying you have to find a poem that nobody has ever recorded. And so they're tracking down all these wild and woolly, very, very interesting poems, often by people nobody's ever heard of. There are a number of anthologies of 18th century poetry that pull together just obscure, really cool poets. And so my students are starting to record some of those, and it's pretty fun.
Well, speaking of anthologies, early on, it was maybe 2008, LibriVox actually pointed to your site as a kind of a really useful, great anthology.
That was really fun. Basically what they did was set up a recording project in honor of my students. And so they recorded a lot of Anne Finch and some other 18th century poets. And then we linked to all their recordings, and they invited our students to go record for LibriVox, which a few did, not very many. That's awesome. But the students were really pretty tickled by that.
That's awesome. And so you're actually building an online anthology of 18th century poetry. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, one of the things, I know we talked about this a number of years back, the question is, who's using this?
Oh, right? Funny answers to that one.
So you build this thing, it's an open source, it's an open project, your students are populating it, and a lot of questions faculty have is, it just goes out into the great void.
Well, in fact, this has gotten picked up by some really odd and unusual. You helped me put Google Analytics on there, and one of the things we found for that was that a whole bunch of students in Saudi Arabia were not only listening to the poems, but writing comments about the poems.
Yeah.
Turned out it was an English learners class, and they put up their little mini essays right next to the poetry. They were all into Alexander Pope, which is an interesting choice for somebody learning advanced English.
Exactly.
So that was pretty cool. Another one, a guy from India left a comment saying, I've downloaded all these poems, various authors he liked, and I listen to them on my morning walks every day.
That's
Who
wild.
knows who's using it, in other words, other 18th century professors and students, but also just random people around the world who like poetry.
And looking at the analytics on a regular basis, it's one of the UMW blog sites that on a regular basis gets thousands of hits per month.
It's
And that's a
got
remarkable
a lot of connections
thing.
nowadays.
But I still cannot get over the fact, just in my imagination, of watching a group of Saudi Arabian students learning English, quoting Alexander Pope. Like,
He's a great poet. Why wouldn't you learn English
I
that way?
understand, but even as an
They
English
can come
speaker,
visit America and speak in rhymed couplets.
like my new brocade, like
Yeah.
I think he's one of the few people who people could say, "Oh, this is what a zugma is," right? Like he actually
exactly.
did know how to do zugmas.
It's pretty fun.
Oh,
No,
that's
that's
awesome.
been a good project. And that was originally set up, gosh, I'm thinking 2005 or 6 actually for
Yeah.
that one, that you started helping me with that. And
It was
gradually
amazing.
we shifted over. It's now part of the UMW network here.
Well, that's
so that
interesting.
it's-
I mean, if we go back to it, you can see on the actual site, it is a umw.edu kind of. Did we actually map it? Yeah, we did.
yeah,
we mapped
it's
it on
mapped
top
to be
of.
part of the university's website.
Which
so
is
that
great, 'cause you don't have
We're
the
essentially maintaining the archive
umwlives.org.
now. Yep,
Yeah.
that's nice too.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's still you still kind of build it and your students maintain it on UMW blogs, but we just have a kind of official view of it now.
The nice thing is a lot of my students do blogs for other classes, or they do
Yeah.
blogs on their own. So many of them are coming to it already completely familiar with the technology, really
Yeah.
happy to be doing this stuff. And so I just say, well, here's another way to use your blog, and they go, oh.
See, it's been amazing to see. I mean, just on, I guess not on the outside entirely, because I'm part of the UMW Blogs project, but to see how much that's become a part of the culture. Where we're not really asking students, oh, yeah, there's this crazy technology you have to learn.
Nope, it's something that a lot of them are getting used to by themselves and seeing the potential for.
Yeah, and the fact is one of the interesting things, like you're using it, you've been using it for years, but WordPress now is so much a part of the infrastructure of how people use the web more generally
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
world.
Lots of websites out there are built with WordPress
Yeah.
these days.
And so it doesn't seem like this crazy fringe technology anymore, like it did when you were building this in
I was
2005.
going, okay, a blog thing here. What if I want to actually... But you figured out for me how to create an archive and how to set it up so that the things I want will stay permanently in the places I want. And
Yeah,
now it's
been very
expanding and
seamless.
expanding.
But it's also great when you have faculty who are self-sufficient. And we'll get to that with Domain of One's Own.
Domain of One's Own's made that even easier.
It's
Yep.
interesting. Well, Domain of One's Own, we had a faculty initiative, we said, and Marie was part of that faculty initiative. In fact, you created and still have a site, Marie McAllister.
Pretty minimal site, but it's there as a placeholder till I do more with it.
Well,
but the thing it's
minimalism
great
is the
for
vision of the web right now.
that maybe yes. I've always been kind of minimalist, but no. The cool thing about it for me is that it has let me do a number of things that I used to do in the past with a lot of help from the technology folks like you,
Sure.
and now I can actually do a lot of that myself.
Yeah.
So that's been the fun part of this is going, okay, I can use my domain as a storage site, as a link site,
Yeah.
as a place that gives me tools.
And it's interesting because that's right now what it is. It's linking out to your other courses. This semester, you're doing stuff on Canvas. You're doing stuff in the English Coffee House, which we'll talk about in a second. And then you have the 18th century audio, as well as we'll talk about a project from last semester. But what's interesting, and it's one of the things that I think people miss, is you don't have to do one. It's not like, okay, I'm doing WordPress, hence I don't use Canvas. Or fact is many of our faculty, according to numbers from last year, at least 70% of our faculty who are using UMW blogs also use Canvas. And I like the fact that it isn't one or the other on this campus. It's actually, there are several tools we're providing with you to do the job you need to do.
And they integrate pretty nicely together, too. You can make links from your learning management system to your blog, to your wiki,
Exactly.
to your whatever else. But you can also make stuff go back and forth, different directions. So, yeah.
So we have worked for many a year together, and one of the things that I think is interesting is you last semester started experimenting with kind of wiki software for one of your classes. And I don't know who you talked to about this, and I kind
Well,
of...
you've forgotten. You set up a wiki for me years ago to help run a course. I was building a course website, trying to get off of Blackboard at that time. So I had some practice with the wikis
Yeah.
and sort of saw what they could do. And then with the domain,
That's
I could
right.
build my own.
It's cool, and you did, as usual. I mean, here's a wiki that you created, and what application were you using for this?
This one was DocuWiki. I was used to
Okay.
MediaWiki, which I actually like a little bit better, but DocuWiki came up and I couldn't find MediaWiki. I said, oh, heck, I'll go ahead and try this new one.
Which
Went
I
ahead
love.
and tried it.
I love the fact
my
that you
students
use it.
learned more than I learned. Basically, what they've done here, what you're looking at, is a magazine that they built for this class. It's an English 202 writing class called
Sure.
Writing About Medicine, and the students in it all do one big final research paper on some topic that really excites them. In this case, some medical topic that fascinates them. They built a magazine in which all their research papers are there, presented, one
Wow.
hopes, in a format that's actually kind of attractive to the public. And then they picked out pictures to go with them. They illustrated their own essays. They set things up so that some of the sources can be linked to live and
Absolutely.
so forth, which was pretty fun for them. I then promised them, yes, this will be here. It's a potential resume credit for you. You can create links to it in the future. And they were pretty tickled to have built their own magazine. This is a section of honor students in the spring of 2013.
And it's remarkable. So they're doing the research. You have all of the actual research online and the
Scroll
site.
that fast, you're going to make your viewers seasick. You know that.
I'm sorry, but you actually have these amazing works cited pages.
Yeah, they built all this themselves. All I did was set up the main page and run a couple of class sessions in which I taught a few real basic commands along with teaching some writing skills and turned them loose.
And how do they feel about having this stuff out there on the web?
I did say we're going to take a vote. Do you want this there? Do you want things to be anonymous? This class voted not to use last names.
Sure.
Some of the students said, no, I want a resume credit. I want this. So they went ahead and put full names.
Awesome.
There are different options there, but they were all really tickled. They liked the idea that somebody out there might be going, well, let's see, I wonder what the latest is on their
Yeah.
interesting medical topic, and then jumped into it, went someplace with it.
And found
So
what they did and
they-
then used their
that's-
sources.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Thinking about it, next time I would build it so there's comments locations where they could get feedback. But I also wanted to do some security protection, so
Absolutely.
you can't just have everybody changing your wiki once the students put their research papers on there.
Yeah, and the fact is also is that's part of the being open on this culture is, or in this campus culture is like you decide, do you want your stuff out there or do you not? You know, you do have some choice in that, and I think part of what domain of one's own more generally is you decide also as a faculty member how you want to use these technologies, how you want to put them out there, what you want to make private, what you want to make public, and you've done a great job of that.
With lots of advice.
Yes, I mean, but here's a good example. You have another thing that you installed, and we do have a history with PHPBB. So you and I kind of go way back with PHPBB.
I've been using bulletin boards in classes for a long time, various systems over the years, and gosh, I'm thinking 6 or 7 years. Every semester I'd say, Jim, could you build me another PHP bulletin board?
right.
So that I could use it. What I do with these is, for my classes, lots of short papers in the 18th century classes put publicly so that everybody reads each other's, and depending on the semester,
Sure.
even occasionally have them up into the public. They give feedback to each other. When I come into class, I'll pull up whatever's been done that day. We'll start talking about those particular topics. They're expected to read and respond to one another. So it's a great way to create some kind of in-class writing that is an exchange instead of simply you write it, you give it to me, I give it back to you,
Exactly.
nobody ever sees it. But I've been doing some fun things with it recently, and having my own domain let me do some even more fun things there.
Let's talk a little bit about the fun things you've been doing with it, because as we talked about this last week, I was blown away. So you have this grand salon, and people can see this online, and you have a whole series of kind of posts that people are doing, and obviously they're using it. You can see through the views.
It's required. They have to use it. But they also look at each other's,
Yeah,
which
so
is nice.
here's a good example, right? We have group 3 posts for, November 11th. And we have Queen Anne's Revenge. I don't
Which is
even
a pirate ship, that one.
Kagadia Dara. Is that like Gaelic?
Cogan Andare, which is my bad pronunciation, is an Irish name for the War of the Kings. It's a liberation movement there. All the students in the class had to pick an 18th century avatar, something from the period, in this case 1660 to 1740 that we're studying. And it could be a person, a place, a thing, an event, and then it had to be something that had a photo, so that then they've got, not a photo, an illustration.
Sure.
So then they've got an illustration next to it, and they post as that person all semester.
Awesome.
Which is pretty cool.
And they have the avatar with Salem witch trials or Kagadia Dara, and that's actually an image of that.
Somebody's contemporary painting of something or other that's relevant to them. Yep.
Now, do they know who each other are?
They do not, and in fact, I do not. At the beginning of the semester, they all have to tell me who they are, so that then I can make one column in Excel that says, here are their names, but then the avatar column is the only one that's visible as I grade, which is kind of cool. At the end of class, we have a coming out party where they all say, I was so-and-so, I was the Salem Witch Trials, I was Spinning Jenny, I was Cotton Mather, I was George Washington, and then they tell a little about a post that they liked doing, or a post of somebody else's that they enjoyed, which
And
is
you were
pretty fun.
mentioning they really do take on the identities, right? So when they talk
Every
about
so
the
often
event
in
or
a
the
post,
person,
well, they don't have to write as that person
Sure.
or event, obviously, but then every so often, we'll be reading Alexander Pope, and there'll be an Alexander Pope posting things, and he'll say, well, in my poem, I think I say, which is pretty entertaining. Yes, they like that.
I really love the way in which, the PHBBB or this bulletin board has kind of become a space where they perform out, their investment in the class. I mean, it's cool. I mean, we've become as a group, and I think for some good reasons, you could argue, so WordPress heavy. We do a lot of our stuff in UMW blogs. We kind of
And
default
it
to
has
it.
sort of similar kinds of capabilities.
Yeah.
The things I like about this, well, it can be sort of gamified. They earn
right.
ranks the more they post. They
Oh,
can
wait,
post
let's
under
talk
their
a bit about that,
avatars. They
'cause-
can. There's just some things I can do with the bulletin board that I like better than blogs. Partly the layout is just faster for students to get to what they want to get to.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about it. You brought it up, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at it. So you have someone who's posted 8 times. And under Queen Anne's Revenge, for example, it says, learned natural philosopher.
Which in the 18th century we pronounced learned natural
Learned.
philosopher,
Sorry.
of course.
Of course.
That means that person has posted enough times to earn that particular rank.
I love that. It's kind of like a badge.
You start off as a visitor to London, and by the end, I can't remember what I made up, but every semester I make up crazy random ranks you can earn. Some of the students catch on to it, so they post a whole lot to find
That's
out what rank they can
right.
get to be.
So here, this person who's the Irish Gaelic, I won't try and pronounce, posts 12 times. In the know, personal secretary to the Prime Minister. That's awesome.
It's entertaining.
And this
yeah.
unfortunate person who posts 5 times is only a carousing member of the landed gentry.
And there are lots and lots of those.
I love what you're doing with this.
It's entertaining, and it's a way to say, okay, yeah, you must do this writing, and yes, I will be grading it,
Yeah.
but other people are going to be reading it, and other people are going to be reacting to it, and you can do this in a way that's kind of fun too.
Absolutely.
So it, I think, makes it a little more enjoyable for them.
It's brilliant, and I think it's a really good example of what's possible. Obviously, the technology and domain of one's own makes certain things possible. I'm not going to deny that. That's why we're doing it. But also, at its root, it's this: being able to experiment somewhat freely with having fun, and how the technology can kind of build community and allow for you to do amazing things, which you're doing.
That's the goal here, the
Yeah.
building community part especially.
Yeah.
The idea that not all your work has to be done completely in isolation. You can be part of a group of us who are excited about this
Sure.
stuff, and you're trying to share what you're learning with other people.
And how do you feel about the idea of, so you have this as a faculty member, and you're actually using it and experimenting with it. Do you think that also translates to the project we're doing now with giving it to students?
I don't have any students this semester who are using it
Yeah.
who've told me about it, but I'm busy thinking of ways to use it in future semesters.
Sure.
I think for students, though, it's been amazing. I was just talking yesterday to a colleague in the art department whose juniors and seniors are using this to build artist portfolios.
That's right.
Using domain of one's own.
Absolutely.
There's some of the first year seminars are using this to start creating academic portfolios. Here's the best work I've done over these 4 years. So that at the end of their time, they'll have that, and if an employer wants to link to it, they can set it up. Here's my best work as an undergraduate.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've got colleagues who use that as a way of creating a professional identity as a writer. Creative writers
Yeah.
in my department do a lot of that. Let's use this as a website, but I can put up links to things I've written. I
Yeah.
can create places where readers can give me feedback. There are a lot of interesting possibilities once you control it yourself.
Yeah, it really does. And like the web, I mean, it allows you to use a whole series of possibilities that you install, like DocuWiki, PHPBB. If you're going to use MediaWiki or WordPress, they're all single install. Basically,
Click a button and set it up,
Exactly.
and there are a couple hundred on there, I think, that I have no clue what they are yet. So lots of
I think
chances for the future.
You're most likely to work through them. If we were like say most likely to succeed, most likely to work through all the
to
open source
experiment and see which ones work, maybe.
Yeah, it's amazing. So how does it feel to be your own sysadmin? I mean, because that's
like
basically
it.
what you
I
are.
like it. I feel like I can do a lot of what I want to. I can still run to you for help and regularly do, as you've noticed, but I'm feeling a lot more independent. It's just fun to be able to go, okay, what if I tried this thing?
Yeah.
And there it works.
And the independence is actually interesting. And obviously, I think you overstate how much you come to us, because we actually have to drag you in here.
Oh,
to show-
please.
But I mean, also this question of independence and freedom, it's one of the things we came up against when we first started. Like, is the overhead too much? Will it be too much for faculty and students to try and wrangle with some of this stuff? And we've kind of gone back and forth on that.
But you don't have to learn it all at once. See, that's the nice thing.
Yeah.
Right now, I know how to use a wiki and a bulletin board and WordPress, period.
That's right.
That's not a whole lot. And I didn't learn those all at once either. I learned one, and then I picked up another one, and then
Yeah.
and I'm getting more sophisticated with each as I go along. It's that potential to do more, and as other students and other faculty experiment, to
Yeah.
say, oh, look what so-and-so's doing. I want to try a variation of that in my class.
Exactly.
Ah, this science project could be adapted for an English project.
Yeah.
Once you get a body of people experimenting with the same kinds of potential, things go crazy.
I think that's a great point. And the idea is, twofold. One, you also have a pretty remarkable archive of your teaching, which at Mary Washington is a big deal because we have a lot of awesome teachers here.
Mm-hmm.
And archiving and sharing that's important. The other thing is, how do we get, faculty like you, and there's 29 others like you who have experimented with domain of one's own, to actually see what each other are doing in the classroom and actually maybe become even better by sharing, collaborating as a result of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're thinking of ways, I think Martha Burtis and Tim Owens right now are coming up with ways that, every class or every student that does work on this domain of one's own on the server, we can find ways for those who are interested to show them up and kind of, juxtapose, hey, something that's happening in the English 325 class might also juxtapose across, this protein biology class. And how do we actually start thinking about, if we're going to start really exposing the life and mind of the UMW, we need to start, hooking in, I think would be a good way to talk about, into what's happening in that class and exposing it to the degree students and faculty are comfortable.
Done something very cool like that with UMW blogs, where you can see
Yeah.
a feed and here's the latest, and doing something like that with the domains down the road would
Yeah.
be very nice.
It's really kind of thinking about it, the learning management system does certain things. It does grading and it does quizzing and other things well.
Store your syllabus, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But I have run a semester where I didn't use an LMS at all. It was less convenient in certain ways, so I went back to using the LMS. But I could do everything I needed to with WordPress alone.
Exactly. And the other thing is, like, what we need is we need to give faculty empowerment to use that and students, but we need a space where it shows off that work so they feel like they're not operating in a bubble. Like with 18th century audio, maybe some of the things that kept you going and your students going is knowing that there was someone in India who was walking every morning listening to
to Alexander Pope. It's so great.
And that sense of community is really what we're still trying to build in with Domain of One's Own,
Yeah.
because to make it that much more valuable.
Well, I see great value down the road.
Cool.
I think 5 years from now, every small college in America, every single student's going to have their own domain, and most big colleges are going to be trying desperately to figure out how they can do it.
Wow.
They've got a server budget, that's all they need. I mean, it's not that hard.
It's not. We've been
Once you
doing-
have the idea.
It's true. We've been doing commodity hosting for a decade.
Wow.
Why can't we now start to empower faculty and students to do it?
The other cool thing about it, which we haven't mentioned yet today, is that students can take their domains with them when they graduate.
Absolutely.
That's something pretty great. So if I have students use the domain to do something exciting, it's not just going to disappear when they graduate. It's going to become part of, as permanent as they want it to be.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. And, I think the idea that, A, they can leave with it and they can have this $10 a year domain that they control. And they could point to free services if they don't want to host it. But that's kind of an address, right? It's a place where they identify who they are digitally.
Yeah.
And think about it like this. So say K-12 starts to do certain things like this. Why couldn't we simply say, oh, you already have a domain that you created for your K-12? Well, that's fine. We can just hook it into our system. Feel free to get free hosting for us for 4 years. And then please take it all with you when you go.
Make it a lifetime thing,
Yeah.
and make part of it, you can do part professional, part artistic, part personal, there are a lot of different ways this can happen.
And that's right. I mean, the lifetime, we talk about lifelong learners, and that's trying what we'd kind of promote. And I believe in that idea.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it's a great idea. But what better way for an institution like Mary Washington to trace those vectors of learning and thinking as through a digital? We've never had the ability to trace it like we do now.
That's what the whole discussion about assessment is. How do we show
Okay.
that somebody has changed from the first year freshman to the senior? Well, it's pretty easy for a student to look at and go, wow, this is the paper I wrote 4 years ago. Look how much better I am. Look how
Yes.
much more I can do.
Yeah.
And of course, since nowadays, they're not just writing papers and giving presentations, they're doing all kinds of digital things in classes. this stuff can all be archived now,
Absolutely.
which
And it's
best,
really-
best can be saved.
And it's how I came to it all. I always thought, with a young child who was, just born, like, how could I archive this moment? And it's funny that the digital has provided both, we'll lose more information than ever before, but we'll really be able to store and kind of build on unbelievable, amount of data that defines us. Because it's not just data. This is not just pushing and making an argument. It's who we are as developing human beings.
And then my job as a professor is going to be to teach you how to winnow it down to the good stuff and get rid of all the stuff you don't really want to keep the data for.
Exactly. I mean, I absolutely think that's right. I mean, and building our understanding of the digital into the very curriculum at Mary Washington is one of the things that's truly going to make us distinctive.
Yeah, it already is.
Yeah.
I mean, the UMW blogs has made this school a whole different place.
And it's
just
the faculty,
let
'cause,
alone the domain of one's own.
Faculty have defined it. And, DTLT is happy to be associated with it and stuff, but also, I mean, we can never get away from the point that who are we if people aren't actually using it and thinking creatively about it?
Well, basically the way I see it is I don't have time to discover the tools. You teach me the tools. I think a little bit about it. I say, what if I could do something a little different? I come back to you, so that it becomes an exchange back and forth all the time.
Wow.
And the students are getting that same thing, and they're contributing back and forth that way. It's a learning community.
Well, as usual with you, Marie, it's been an amazing exchange.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you
Lots
for
of fun
coming to
doing
us.
this. Yeah,
No,
my
it's
pleasure.
awesome. You're awesome. And that's it for DTLT today. Bye-bye. Get your own domain. What are you waiting for, hippies?
Thank you.